Now, the Black Business Council president is calling on Eskom to refrain from unfairly targeting black and women-owned companies. It all comes after reports that Eskom has written to National Treasury to blacklist Econ Oil and Energy Pty Limited, which is a black female-owned company, from doing business with the state. Well, for more on this, I am joined by Sikonathi Mantshantsha from Eskom, and in a short while we'll be joined by Elias Monage, who is from the Black Business Council. He's the president of the Black Business Council. Sikonathi, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of the, the stance taken by the Black Business Council, the accusation saying that you are being biased in this regard?
It's quite amazing. It would also be amusing if it was not so costly to the people of South Africa that you would have a prominent organization which claims to represent black business people actually defending corruption. The facts of the matter are that Eskom will, in the next few days, provide evidence to the National Treasury in line with the regulations that govern blacklisting of companies that have committed acts illegality that may or may not include fraud and other forms in their procurement practices with any state-owned organization. Eskom will therefore be submitting that documentation to National Treasury. It has already informed Econ Oil that it will remove it and deregister it from its database of suppliers for at least 10 years, with effect from from March 2021. This is as a result of contracts that were entered into or tenders that were awarded to Econ Oil starting in October 2019, in which the evidence has been led in court, and these contracts have been set aside and reviewed by the High Court in Johannesburg in June last year, and the Supreme Court of Appeal reaffirmed the decision and dismissed Econ Oil's bid with costs after Eskom showed evidence of irregularities, procurement fraud, and other illegal conduct on the part of both some directors of Econ Oil and some Eskom employees.
The BBC has also argued, Sikonathi, that it's quite surprising. I mean, you make mention of allegations of corruption now. The BBC saying in their statement here that it's surprising that Eskom never wrote to National Treasury to blacklist state-captured linked SAP, McKinsey and Deloitte from doing business with the state.
The cases are quite different. The starting point is, to this day, Eskom is still trying to recover some losses estimated at more than 1.2 billion rand from Econ Oil as a result of these activities that I've mentioned, stretching all the way back to 2003 when Econ Oil was found to have overcharged Eskom. The amount, and this will soon be in the court documents, about 1.2 billion rand that Eskom is trying to recover from Econ Oil, which is not volunteering to return any of the fees. The companies you have mentioned.
Sikonathi, if I can just ask you to hold that trail of thought there. We now have Elias Monage, Black Business Council President, on with us. A very good afternoon to you. As I speak to Sikonathi representing Eskom, he says that Econ Oil has been marred in allegations of some corruption. What's your take? I don't know how much of the response you got from Sikonathi Mantshantsha.
Let me firstly recognize Sikonathi and the listeners on this program tonight or today, this afternoon. I think first thing first, one of the issues that we have raised with Eskom is around reversing a transformatory agenda where since I think the new leadership took over, they've technically reverse appointments of black-owned companies, let alone the women-owned companies. And I'll come in a minute to the issue of Econ Oil. Now, the second part that Eskom, up until to this day, they've never dealt with is around the question of companies that are fingered, companies that they've overcharged Eskom, and those companies they reflected on the Zondo Commission, and none of the blacklisting or even not doing business with Eskom never happened. They still continue doing business with Eskom as an entity. And then I guess it's because the rationale is simple. They are big, wide-owned companies or foreign-owned companies, some of the combination of wide-owned and foreign-owned. Now, the third part that Sikonathi is referring to, again, when the Econ Oil tender was awarded to them, or when the tender was awarded to them, again, there were lots of issues that went back and forward, and they re-tendered the whole thing. And despite the fact that there was...
Perhaps if you'll allow me, Mr. Monage, to just hold that thought as we will continue this conversation shortly after the break. I've got the Eskom spokesperson, Sikonathi Mantshantsha, as well as Black Business Council President Elias Monage, speaking about the BBC's call on Eskom to refrain from unfairly targeting black and women-owned businesses. So we'll have this conversation as we take you to the top of the hour, where we will continue that conversation in just a moment. Don't go away. Coming to you live from Johannesburg. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Newsfeed PM right here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. If you've just tuned in, welcome. I'm Pastor Tole. We continue the conversation with the Black Business Council President, who's calling on Eskom to refrain from unfairly targeting black and women-owned companies after reports that Eskom has written to National Treasury to blacklist Econ Oil and Energy Pty Limited, which is a black female-owned company, from doing business with the state. Well, for this conversation, I am joined by Sikonathi Mantshantsha, Eskom spokesperson, and Elias Monage, who's Black Business Council President. Gentlemen, thanks for staying with us. And I would like to perhaps go back to the points that you were trying to raise, Elias, as you spoke about the Econ oil tender issues. That's along the trail of thought you were on before I interrupted you.
No, thanks. The point that I was raising was that when the tender was awarded to Econ Oil, there were internal processes that were followed, and to our surprise, they then re-advertised the tender. They won it again for the second time. And Eskom executive then conducted the so-called an alleged corruption by Econ Oil, corruption and various other allegations labeled against them. And their own report confirmed that there was no corruption in any form or shape. And that tender was awarded to them. They proceeded delivering whatever that they were delivering in terms of the award. Subsequent to them, after a certain period of time, they were then suspended. And that tender was then awarded to another company. And again, based on our information, that company that was awarded is also then linked to a number of people that they are high in the parameter of Eskom, even outside. And I'm saying those are some of the allegations that it came to attention. And what then happened subsequent again to that, there were internal processes that went back and forward, and now and came to a conclusion that Econ Oil were caught up in any corrupt activity. The matter then went back and forward in various forums to the extent that now they shifted from a corruption and unlawful getting the award to something that is called now overcharging the entity. And that process, it went back and forward to the extent that when the matter then again was then suggested to say, can they look at inviting the relevant people to the table? And then again, nothing basically then happened. And to our surprise, what we're then left with is when one Econ Oil was suspended or barred to do any business with Eskom, despite the fact that there is no judgment whatsoever against them. That's one. Two, despite the fact that they were blacklisted unlawfully by Eskom, there were letters also from the National Treasury saying to Eskom their action is unlawful. We do have all that information. And now, a week ago, again, they then received another letter, Econ Oil, from Eskom Legal to say, you are blacklisted, to be deregistered, will not notify the National Treasury then to remove you from the National Central Database. And I'm saying that's the point where we are now. We're basically saying, surely, there is another separate matter where an issue around cartel between Eskom and various other companies have been reported. And the question of pricing, it then takes a different form and shape, where it's then reported to the Competition Commission then to consider this thing. And that's the point that we are raising to say, surely in the absence of anything, Mantshantsha, you need them to relook at this thing. And I know that you are a spokesperson, but the institution, Eskom as an institution, as a national entity, a state-owned entity for that matter, they cannot then continue victimizing black-owned companies, let alone being a black female. And particularly this thing is happening during the month of August. This is a month of a woman, and now we are seeing women.
Perhaps we should just give Sikonathi a chance to respond to some of the factors that you've raised there, Sikonathi. He says that the blacklisting that you made mention of some of the allegations that were on Econ Oil and Energy. Now he's saying that the blacklisting was unlawful. What's your response?
Thank you, Mpo. It's quite nice of the BBC to come on air and on national television and make all sorts of allegations and ignore all the facts. Now, let me help you with the facts. One, on the 29th of June 2021, the High Court in Johannesburg set aside and reviewed the contract that was awarded to Econ Oil because it had been infested and riddled with corruption. Both on the side of Eskom employees, some Eskom employees, and indeed on the part of Econ Oil. Econ Oil appealed that decision of the High Court, and the Supreme Court of Appeal dismissed their application with costs. So these are the facts. And Econ Oil now has only one court to go to if it still wishes to review that decision of the High Court, and that's the Constitutional Court. This is on prima facie evidence of corruption and indeed inflating contracts and working with Eskom employees illegally so for the benefit of Econ Oil. Then on the 17th of August, today is the 21st of August 2022, Eskom wrote to Econ Oil and informed the directors of Econ Oil that one, the company will be deregistered from its database of suppliers, and that Eskom will also inform National Treasury of this decision. This is based on the evidence that the High Court and the Supreme Court of Appeal made the decision on to save Eskom 8 billion rand that would have been paid to Econ Oil. Secondly, as I have already said, Eskom is still in the process of recovering more than 1.2 billion rand of fees that were paid irregularly so to Econ Oil over the years since 2003. And now you have the BBC coming to defend corruption, where the High Court has already made a judgment, where the Supreme Court of Appeal has already made a judgment.
Perhaps let's now get some response then from you, Mr. Monage. What's your take? Sikonathi here saying that the BBC is defending corruption.
No. I think Mantshantsha needs to be honest and frank to himself and even to the listeners. The matter before the High Court and even to the Supreme Court of Appeals, it was not about corruption. It was about Eskom in their own papers alleging that there were internal processes that their own people they didn't follow. It has nothing to do with an element of corruption. Secondly, as an organization, we are on record that we don't support and encourage any corruption in any form or shape. Thirdly, we had a meeting with the minister a week ago. This letter was then issued. Part of the issue that we raised with the minister, Godan, was that why is Eskom targeting black-owned companies? And we mentioned specifically Econ Oil. We mentioned even the accounting firm that eventually then closed down. It was also women-owned or black-owned. Now, those are some of the issues that we are raising. And I'm saying it will be remiss of the Eskom spokesperson to say there's a corruption activity. None of those issues that you have mentioned in the court papers, they deal with a corruption in any form or shape. The issue around overcharging that you are referring to, the matter was then canvassed to say if indeed Eskom believes that there is an overcharge. Remember that product, that commodity, it comes from Sosot. Now, if it comes from Sosot, call the relevant parties to the table so that you understand the financial model of this thing. And remember, the question of pricing doesn't come at the tail end. When you award a contract to a company, you agree upfront in terms of saying you are going to charge A, B, C, D, and these are deliverable times. That is the basis in which contracts are awarded. And I'm saying all those things were followed, and the award was then given to Econ Oil. And then that's the point that we are raising to say, if indeed, again, all those things have been followed, and the question of overcharging, if there is such a thing, according to you, Sikonathi, you need then to follow a particular process, in which in this case, you guys didn't follow that process. And hence I'm saying to you, the matter around cartel is a matter that deals with a competition commission. And as a result of that, there is a particular process that needs to be followed. The point that, again, we need then to deal with here is that before even this matter was then, if that is the case, why then Eskom didn't respond to the letter that they received from National Treasury to say their action is unlawful in whatever form or shape, when they were basically then terminated the contract from Econ Oil. And I'm saying that's one thing. Two, they cannot then, after a long period of time, then come today, after we had a meeting with the minister, to say we are now sending a letter to the National Treasury then to remove Econ Oil from the National Central Database, because technically they've done it for quite some time, where, Econ Oil, their contract was terminated. They were barred then to do any business, including even the extent that even some of the banks, they closed their accounts. And that's the point that we're raising here. We are not talking about something that is not existing. And again, if there is a prima facie case, surely, on corruption, there was nothing of that nature. The matter before courts is not about corruption. And again, it then tells you and shows and demonstrates clearly that the issues that the Eskom, they're basically trying to get, they went all over the show trying to get anything around the corruption. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. Even the courts have never pronounced on this matter. The point that I'm raising is that when the matter was then dealt at court, they dealt with where Eskom, they basically said, we awarded this contract, and our own internal process, they were not followed by our own people. It has nothing to do with an external person. When you follow the due process, an external person, you then get an award letter to say you have been awarded. Now, and then later the institution comes and says, sorry, our own processes, we didn't follow it. Now, whose problem is that? It's not the problem of Econ Oil, it's the problem of Eskom. And now they cannot hide and then go into a field then to try and get the reasons for a termination to justify this thing and using corruption. And I'm saying nothing of any sort or nature that the courts have found on any corrupt activity.
Perhaps let me bring in Sikonathi there. I know you want to respond to some of the points that were being raised there, saying that it's an issue not about corruption, according to Elias Monage, and also perhaps clarity on Eskom's transformation agenda, which is something that has also come out very strongly within this. Eskom, do you think that Eskom is unfairly targeting black and women-owned companies? Is that, an allegation which has some form of substance when it comes to the transformation agenda?
Paul, I will not let Mr. Monage off so easily when he comes here to make wild allegations and actually distorts a court order where Judge Valley on the 29th of June 2021 actually said that contract was infested with palpable corruption, and the court had no choice but to set it aside. That is the decision of the court. Now, as I have said again, I will repeat this. Eskom is now in the process of recovering funds it had already paid over the years to the company in question. What we have here is the Black Business Council standing up to come and defend corruption, on which a court no less than the Supreme Court of Appeal has already made a decision. We have to wonder what is in it for the BBC. By the way, Mr. Monage very much talks about black companies and black people. He conveniently omits the basic fact that the victims of this corruption are the black people who consume electricity, who then have to pay these inflated fees in order to pay for this kind of corruption that has been set aside by the High Court. Now, your question is whether Eskom is targeting black companies. That would be laughable if it was not so serious a matter. Eskom is a company owned, controlled, and really directed by the government of the Republic of South Africa, which is a democratic government, and on behalf of the people of South Africa, 90% of whom are black people. There is not a case in front of any court in this land where any black supplier has been removed from supplying Eskom with any services and doing business with Eskom on the basis of race. I would welcome Mr. Monage to point that out. The company of whose name he could not even remember, the accounting company, I assume he's talking about an auditing firm called Nkonki. Again, Mr. Monage needs to do himself a favor and read the Zondo Commission report. That company collapsed as a result of the participation, its own participation in corruption and fraud that targeted Eskom, amongst others. And today it does not exist. Then you have the Black Business Council coming here to tell the people of South Africa that black companies are being targeted. Corrupt companies will be removed and have to be removed from doing business with Eskom, and the National Treasury has to take that step forward as the law indeed demands.
Okay, so in closing there, Mr. Monage, would you like to say anything in response to that? Eskom saying that it does not deal with corrupt companies, that corruption is really the root here.
The reality of the situation is that, Eskom, they're basically on a mission of checking things without any substantive evidence in any form or shape. And I'm saying you cannot then be selective, Sikonathi, because the letter from Treasury to Eskom, you are not even talking about that, you are silent. Two, the point that I've raised that as an organization, we are against any corruption in any form of shape. We're not going to keep quiet when black companies, they are targeted for no apparent reason. And you keep talking about a prima facie case. And I'm saying it's a pity that the listeners and even the newsroom, they don't have the information on the actual documentation. And I think perhaps we'll then be in a position then to give you all the documentation so that you can then read for yourselves. And I think we need to be honest to ourselves that the matter that you are referring to has nothing to do with corruption. And in an event where you are basically saying the matter is around the cancellation of the tender based on your own internal processes, that's not corruption. And there's nothing to do with an external company for that matter. And that's the point that we have raised. And the last point that we are raising with you is that we are not just going to the national television and raising these issues. We have raised these matters with the minister. We have raised with the leadership of Eskom before. We have raised this matter with the Treasury. And I'm saying even if we're then to go back to the prescripts of the national Treasury and even the procurement, and surely the question of blacklisting is a different process altogether. But I'm saying none of those companies that they were caught in corruption were blacklisted by Eskom. And all of them, they are white companies. And we're silent on that matter. I mean, some of them, they've even paid money back, but they're still doing business with Eskom. Now, on what basis then are you then saying, BBC, we support corruption? We have said this thing long time ago. When we called for the Eskom leadership to basically step aside, to basically then vacate their position because they don't know what they're doing. One, we even raised the question of an anti-transformation agenda that had been put aside by the entity, despite the fact that Eskom is a state-owned enterprise. And these are the points that we have raised. And I think also we affirm and we want to engage Eskom in any form or shape on these matters because we don't think that it's fair after so many years in this country where black companies, they've been dealt in this fashion, despite the fact that a number of white companies that or foreign-owned companies that were caught up in corruption, they're still doing business with states. They're still doing business with Eskom. And that's the point that we're raising. And you cannot then be selective, Sikonathi, in your application for anything to say, no, this one is, we're overcharging and whatever. And if, again, there's an overcharge, there is a particular process that needs to be followed. Yeah,
very well. Perhaps, Mr. Monage, if you can just send us those documents, perhaps this conversation can return. But thank you so much for your time, both gentlemen, Sikonathi Mantshantsha, Eskom spokesperson, as well as Black Business Council President Elias Monage.